Good morning, and thank you for joining us in the Influence of Smart Mobility on the Urban Ecosystem session at CAR MBS 2020. During the session, all audience members will be muted to ensure a quality user experience for everyone participating. Please submit your questions by using the Q&A function. If you have any other questions regarding the virtual MBS experience, please feel free to ask those questions at the information desk in the virtual lobby. Please also take a moment to visit the virtual exhibits in the exhibit hall, and if you'd like to earn CEU or PDH credits for participating in CAR MBS, please visit our MBS page on our website at www.cargroup.org to access the registration link for CEUs and PDHs. Once again, thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to welcome session moderator, Senior Vice President, Manick Smith Group, Sean Kelly.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session on the influence of smart mobility on the urban ecosystem. We have some very knowledgeable, experienced panelists here that I want to give them an opportunity to give a little bit about themselves. But we have Director Paul Ajaba from the Michigan Department of Transportation. We have Brendan Jones, the COO of Blink Charging, and Andy Taylor, the Strategy Director at Cubic Transportation Systems. And as you just heard, my name is Sean Kelly. I'm with the Manick Smith Group. I lead our downtown Detroit office and have been in the consulting engineering business for about 34 years now. And I suppose my claim to fame in smart mobility really started about 7-8 years ago when I was asked by the University of Michigan to lead the programming and design of what they now call M-City. And at that time, I really didn't have any idea what I was doing, quite honestly. I don't think most of us did. So much has happened since then in the development of the American Center for Mobility, which I also had an opportunity to play a key role, as well as the Transportation Research Center in Central Ohio, and then on to do studies in this area of smart mobility in other states. And the advancement of technology of the cars and even the infrastructure really is happening in three key areas. One is computer simulation. The other is creating real world environments in safe places where the public's not allowed in. And then also having them tested out on public roads. So that second category is really where my background has been the most involved. So that's a little bit about me. I suppose the thing that I like about this topic a lot is that I don't even own a car. I ride my bike to work every day. I live downtown Detroit, and I feel like I'm practicing mobility as a service for real and tell my coworkers I'm the oldest millennial at Manick Smith. So with that said, I want to turn it over to Director Paul Ajaba, who's actually a friend of mine. We have a lot of experience working together, and someone who's really taking MDOT to new places in this topic. So go ahead, Director Ajaba.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Sean. It's truly an honor to be part of this panel. For me, my background, I started my career with MDOT 30 years ago after completing my master's program at the University of Michigan. I came in through the entry-level program and kind of zigzagged my way to I've been a region engineer, and then I was appointed by Governor Whitmer last year as the director of MDOT. I am truly, truly honored to be the director because there's a lot of initiatives that's going on now that MDOT is involved in this CAV arena. As Sean mentioned with M-City, he was the project manager on the private side, and I was the MDOT project manager on the public side to put that whole project together. And just like him, I did not know anything about CAV when I got involved in it. But as time went on, it became clear to me that this is the future of mobility, and we all need to embrace it. And the state of Michigan as a whole, a lot of credit to my predecessor, who worked with the last administration, worked very hard with our legislatures to put a lot of legislation in place to allow for the use of these automobiles in not just in the testing arena, but also the possibility of moving it out of the testing lab and out in the field to kind of commingle with, with our current vehicle type to see how it will really work. So the demonstration projects have been really, really good, giving us a lot of information that we can use to improve moving forward. At any given time, you can see a test vehicle driving around downtown Ann Arbor or East Lansing and Michigan State. And these are what we like to see, because the more we get out and do some real life testing, the more we can gather some data to help us in perfecting this technology. So I'm really excited to be part of this group, and I'm looking forward to a very good discussion on this topic. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Director Ajaba. And before I have Brendan give his background, I just want to put a polling question out there for everybody to think about and give your feedback on is, you should see it up on your screen now, but how long do people think it will take, all of you out there in the audience, for public transit levels to turn to pre-COVID levels? And we know it's gone down a lot since COVID, but your choices are less than a year, 1 to 2 years, longer than 2 years, or never. And I see those responses coming in. So with that, Brendan, can you give us a little background on you?
Sure, absolutely. First, thanks to CAR for having me on today, and thanks to Carla Bayo, who's been a longtime friend of mine as well, for being part of the panel. So I'm Brendan Jones. I have a long history in the automotive space. I've been in it for over 30 years. I was 21 years with Nissan North America. In 2008-9, I became part of the introduction of the Nissan Leaf into the US marketplace, both on the infrastructure side and on the vehicle side as well. And then I've worked for several other infrastructure companies, as well as Electrify America in my most recent role before joining Blink. So I come at it from a different perspective. It is, the multiplicity of platforms that we're going to have to deal with in the new urban environment, also how that interacts with mass transit, the role of personal vehicles in the future. And then, there's really interesting thing, because we've got all these technologies coming at us. We've got wireless charging. What role is that in the urban environment? We got autonomous vehicles. What role is that? What role is high-speed infrastructure in the urban environment? And then we've got lessons to learn simultaneously. We can look at Europe, where in some situations in Europe, they've banned personal vehicles that are internal combustion engines in 2030 for sale. We have the Columbus projects, which has been underway in the US for quite some time now. And what are we learning from that? So these are the things that we have to pay attention to, because I don't believe there's one solution. It is going to be a multiplicity of solutions that drive us to the new urban environment. And then we have to figure out, what is that environment? There were studies post-COVID that indicated that in the United States, the urbanization would be at 70% by 2050. Is that going to hold true now with COVID? And again, to the other question that was just asked, what is the impact of mass transit, and how does that affect the other platforms that are in development and we hope to deploy across city environments? So that's my perspective. Thanks for the time, and look forward to the questions.
Thank you, Brendan. And I hope the audience can see again that it seems the prevailing opinion there is pre-COVID levels look like 1 to 2 years is what people are thinking. And that's, for the most part, consistent with what a lot of the articles I've been reading on this topic as well. But time will tell. As Brendan was saying, we're kind of in uncharted waters right now in a lot of ways. All right, Andy Taylor, I'd like you to introduce yourself and give us a little background on who you are and what you're doing in this space.
Sure, no problem, Sean. So my name is Andy Taylor, Director of Strategy, Cubic Transportation Systems. And Cubic is sort of really focused at the moment on aspects of how you manage mobility within a city. So for example, if you're talking about fare collection, the system Omni that exists in New York at the moment, that's the Cubic technology. So how we bring together all of that account information for accessing and moving around the city. We also will sort of then start talking about how we integrate private mobility service providers into that sort of account-based solution as well. So it's talking about how we start to build out mobility as a service now. How can we bring in ride hailing and bike share and give people different options of how they actually want to move around the city? That's going to be the sort of critical path forward for us. But at the same time as managing people's mobility and access to mobility that way, It's about how we manage the network holistically as well. We've got to be very cognizant that road traffic is going to increase in the near term, and then hopefully the poll is correct. Maybe 1 to 2 years we'll get back to those sort of levels. But in the interim, it's a case of how we manage that congestion and how we manage that road network. Not only for the people sort of trying to commute to work, but it's basically traffic and transportation, sorry, is the lifeblood of sort of social equity. It's how we move around, it's how we educate, it's how we get to healthcare, it's how we get to entertainment, it's how we drive commerce. And how we manage that network is going to be critical going forward. So Cubic is also looking at traffic management, intersection management, tolling, road user charting, all of those different aspects, which will all come together to help cities sort of look at how they manage all mobility in the city and manage that whole transportation network holistically for the future.
Thank you, Andy. Yes, I think it's safe to say that the urban environment is really where the greatest challenges lie, not to diminish the challenges out on freeways in limited access roads, but the downtown and urban centers has so many more variables that we have to sort of navigate and make this work. So thank you very much, Andy, for that. I think at this point we do have another polling question that you should be able to see here, but what will be the biggest enabler for promoting smart mobility in the urban ecosystem? And a few choices there is the electrification of fleets, better public transport infrastructure, integrated mobility, MOS, or road user and congestion charging. So those are four options the audience has, and we'll see how that, while we're watching those results come in, we can transition here now to a question and answer period. Again, everyone on this call, feel free to bring your questions in. We'll be filtering those and deciding which ones are going to make it to actually be asked. So again, I want to emphasize again the background of the panelists. We got the director of the Michigan Department of Transportation that is dealing really with everything under the sun that relates to this topic. And Brendan with a real focus on electric vehicles, electrification, infrastructure. And with Andy, again, mobility as a service, again, is all those options you have, as he was saying, for getting from point A to point B. Very different than just getting in your car and traveling the way we historically have. So with that, I think I've got a few questions that I can even ask myself here to everyone too, if that helps. And I'm going to take a look at my chat box here. Okay, there's one question that I in my circle, I hear all the time, and this is probably a question for you, Director Ajaba, and I want to read this. With the rise of electric vehicles and increased fuel economy of internal combustion engines, how should states look to increase revenue for road construction previously collected from the gas tax? And I know you've thought about this question many times, so I want to just kind of put that out there because it's always about the money, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, you know, this is actually a very good and timely question because this is some of the things that we're grappling with in the public sector. There's no appetite for raising taxes. As people know, our governor mantra when she ran for election was, we're going to fix our roads, we're going to fix our infrastructure. Part of her initial plan was we're going to try to raise 45 cents gas tax to try and raise revenue to do that. Obviously, we were not successful because, quite frankly, during that whole process, the public agreed that our road infrastructure is really in bad shape. We're 46 out of 50 states in spending per capita when it comes to road funding. However, they were not ready to put up the money to fix the road. So the question is, what are other alternatives out there to generate money without getting into going out to the public every time to say, we need money, knowing that it's just going to be a tough sell. Tolling has been one option, electrification, and so on and so forth. I really see opportunity in this CAV arena as a way for us to generate revenue. We are looking at a lot of myriad of options right now that I will prefer not share in this forum. But like all other public agencies, it's a challenge that we are all dealing with and we have to confront. Quite frankly, even at the national level, I mean, you know, revenue, it's about funding, and how are we going to come up with other alternatives to generate that funding to fix our aging infrastructure?
Yes, yes. Well, I see. Thank you very much, Director Ajba. So this is obviously not an easy thing to solve, but a lot of bright minds are working on it. We're in I think historically, we're going to look back on this era as an extremely pivotal time in how we change the way we move goods and services around. So figuring out how to pay for it is critical. And I think I see a question that came up here, but I had another one I just want to put out there for all three of you, because I think it really comes down to these real issues here. But the vision of transportation, again, the creation of a smart mobility urban ecosystem, again, for all three of you and for the audience to kind of listen to your perspectives on policy and regulations, what might these look like? And when it's always going to come down to partnerships, public, private, and philanthropic and nonprofits and so forth, which we seem to be moving into that as a new normal. What might these look like? And then from a customer perception perspective, what do you all think people are expecting that this is all going to look like as we move into the next decade here? So again, it's on the policy and regulations, the partnerships that are going to be required, and what the public really is thinking this is going to look like. Any one of you kind of jump in on any of those?
So I'll go ahead and then jump in first, and it sort of plays in the previous question as well. When we look at the taxation issue with roads and the advent of electric vehicle and electric fleets. But in general, you know, we have to have a balanced policy that looks at all the emerging technologies, looks at what the consumer demand is for that technology, what are the city's needs, and not just the city's needs in terms of smart mobility and smart transportation, but what does the populace of that city want in terms of its environment and the lifestyle of that particular urban environment. And, you know, those are sort of that confluence of things that come together there. One of the interesting things with EVs is it's not only impacts the environment in terms of emissions, but impacts the quality of life due to the quietness of the vehicles, which reduces noise pollution, which improves the quality of life. So we have to look at all these, and what we have to make sure we do is we have balance, and that's it. And that we don't make mistakes today in these emerging technologies that we have to rip out of the ground or change 10 years from now. Because as we've just heard, you know, capital is scarce. And to fund these massive products, we can't make a mistake at the beginning. So we have to gather all the various different voices on here from stakeholders and make sure we get all of their input and have balanced solutions, not just for 5 years from now, but for 10 and 15 years from now.
Very good. Yeah, something as a with, you know, what in the future with smart mobility, how wide do you make the lanes, and even small adjustments in that turns into tens of millions of dollars, right, for infrastructure.
All day long. We are ripping out chargers today and infrastructure today that we installed 7 years ago because we got it wrong.
Yes, yes. Live and learn. Anyone else, Director or Andy, thoughts on that, again, relating to policy, regulations, partnerships, or just the public in general and their perceptions?
Sure. Just to add on to what sort of Brendan added there about sort of getting the infrastructure right, I think that really drives on public transportation as well. I think we've seen public transportation operators across the world suddenly realize that it's very uneconomical and it doesn't make sense to be running, you know, 80-foot double-decker buses at 10 o'clock at night with one passenger on. It's a case of now you've got to right size your fleet. Now's the time to embrace this and really have a look at what your sort of public transportation needs to be. What's the demand from the public? How are they expecting to travel around? And there's some great work being done by different sort of advocacy groups around the world, looking at what the passenger perceptions are, how they expect to travel in the future. So the use of private mobility service providers to deliver public transportation services will be part of the future. Using, for example, over here, via vans, using those as demand responsive transport to augment the public transportation network is going to be critical to sort of how you bring this together. Those private mobility operators will really help drive the increased use of public transportation, but only part of this mass ecosystem. It's about how we start sort of sharing responsibility for mobility, trying to really understand how this is going to sort of drive people's behaviors. And cities now are starting to realize that and adapt to it fairly quickly. A lot of cities in Europe, Amsterdam, for example, took away over 10,000 parking spaces just to free up the sidewalks to make it easier to walk around. And now it's a case of there's always a massive influx of bikes in Amsterdam anyway, but people are going back to their bikes again. People are using active public transport. And I think that's the sort of policy decisions which are being made for the good. Where this is going to go, I really want to see better use of mobility as a service. I want to see more transportation agencies looking at how they deliver the service, not physically delivering the service themselves. So can we see like demand responsive transport, the use of ride hailing services to offer better services, close down some of those transit deserts and make people more connected and more accessible to what they really need.
Very good. Thank you, Andy. Okay, I see another question coming in here. With this new mobility ecosystem being more interconnected, user-centric, and technology-driven, what are some common themes you're hearing from the actual public transit users about what they need? And how do you envision smart mobility impacting that? So since Andy, you're part of mobility as a service expert, which is an umbrella over everything, you're going to be the default to answer these tough questions. So,
I'm happy to answer any questions, believe me. I think the biggest problem we're going to have is trying to get me to shut up sometimes, but there we go. Sorry, just to leap straight in on that one. Technology-driven, interconnected system, everybody automatically thinks, okay, it's all about mobile phones. It's how are we going to sort of, get people to use their phones, do this, to do that, push information, do everything else. At the end of the day, a city has a responsibility to 100% of its population of a public transportation. So now you've got to make sure that all of these services that you're delivering can be accessible by the unbanked, people who don't have smartphones, people with disabilities. It's a minefield of sort of trying to understand exactly how cities need to evolve. And this interconnectivity and being able to push information is only as good as the user's ability to actually absorb it. And what we've seen from different cities around the world is people are now sort of embracing different technology in different forms. We've seen in Miami, for example, there where the unbanked, they may have access to a smartphone, which is great, but they don't physically have a bank account. So how do you sort of enable bank account type information on a mobile phone, which allows them to access the public transportation system? How do you bring that all together? And it's some of these new solutions which are really driving people's sort of difference. And I think what we're seeing around the world is basically people modifying their travel behaviors of their own accord now. The ability to be able to understand how many people are on this bus coming towards me and say, you know what, I'm going to wait 5 minutes. I'll get the bus that's coming 5 minutes behind it because I know I'm going to be able to get a seat. I know I'm not going to be in a congested area. Those sort of behaviors we're starting to see already. So trying to get the information out there is great. Making sure the information can get to everybody is great. But just letting people modify their own behaviors we're starting to see big differences in that alone. Trying to smooth out some of that demand peak that we have on the available infrastructure capacity is very welcome at this time.
Sean, if I may jump in for a minute,
Sure.
I have a comment from Isabella that wanted me to comment on the last question. I agree with Andy on the policy issue. I think we have to have a cohesive policy from the national level, state level, and then a local city ordinance. And that is recognized as an organization and Michigan as a state, a whole, that's jumped ahead in this technology arena because we have a lot of the automakers here in Michigan. We didn't have a choice. We had to be part of this revolution. And what we've done is we've been able to pass a lot of legislation in the state of Michigan that's enabled us to be a user-friendly state, so to speak, where OEMs can come into town and try their products. But I agree, it's all, I'm working on a national committee right now looking at what are the languages we need to have on the national level where any state that wants to get in this arena can use that as a guiding principle. And then on the state level, every state can have their own laws, obviously. And then the local ordinances, just like we have now, can tailor their ordinance to fit how they want to be part of the technology. So I agree with both Andy and Brandon on that regard. But piggyback on what Andy said with this whole idea, I mean, you see most of our parking downtown now where you can't even use cash anymore. We are going through a revolution. We went from cash to credit card. Now we're going to cell phones, right? You can pay, do a lot of things on your cell phone, pay for parking and all that. And that's part of the system. And that we've placed about 350 miles of devices on our freeways as part of the CAV technology enhancement, all for the sake of safety purposes. So we continue to push that limit of the technology. We open to people, OEMs coming in, sharing their ideas with us because of all the legislation that's been put in place. Again, a lot of credit to my predecessor. It's really helped the state of Michigan to be recognized as one of the leaders in this arena. We have people coming into town all the time, wants to try the product, and we work with them to do that. It's a public-private partnership that has to be the key to success in this arena.
Mm-hmm. So I guess another, in that regard, how do you see the role of citizens then in the responsibility they play in making this advanced mobility ecosystem in an urban environment really operate as best as it can? What are those responsibilities you see the people having to step up to?
Well, I'll touch on that first. I think it goes back to the other point that we just heard being made is we have to come up with solutions that what we would define as an equality of access to all of these new technologies. And how do you do that? It is a big topic when we start talking about low income and disadvantaged communities. And how do we make sure new urban solutions, whatever they may be, whether it's EV public transit, whether it's ride hail, whether it's new fleets that are zero emissions driven, how do you create that access? And this really is a topic that it has some solutions, but it has a long way to go before we create that equality of access to everyone. And all the issues that were just talked about, these are hot in the infrastructure field, big topics on, well, if you don't have a credit card, how do you get a ride hail in a low income and disadvantaged community? And then what are the solutions to getting around that? And they're not quite there yet. They're developing. There's more progress than there was 5 years ago. But that's my comments on that topic. It's an emerging field that we really need to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we can't talk about this without mentioning COVID. So one of the questions, given the impact of COVID on public transport systems globally that we've been witnessing over the past several months, and the inherent return to single-use private vehicles, which we've been seeing, again, with lower volumes, but more of the single driver in a vehicle. What solutions can we employ now to ensure that our road networks do not become blocked or worse levels than they were before COVID happened? Again, this is, we don't know if this is an anomaly, a sort of a fringe sort of thing that's going to be over in the next 1 to 2 years, or how is this affecting that? Anybody want to comment on that? again, from a public transportation or private, single driver?
I'll jump in anecdotally here, but it is becoming more factor as we see more right now in the EV space, and particularly in the fleet EV space. So we're talking about EV school buses, municipal buses, the electrification of municipal fleets, right? The marketplace is alive, more so than it has been post-COVID, which is really pre-COVID, which is really kind of interesting. We're seeing more interest, more phone calls, more installations taking place in this space than we've ever seen before. So I see that as a bright spot, that while we have this temporary situation and we might have a residual effect of it long term, it appears that the direction towards e-mobility solutions, towards the electrification of fleets, is sustainable at this point. So how does that impact road congestion? That's the real tough question. And it's how do we convince the public from a PR perspective that it's safe to drive them back? Because if we go to rules and regulations and say, let's look at New York as an example. One of the solutions I heard that is we have the hot lanes in New York now, that, hey, it's waived for any type of EV mobility solution, whether that be ride hail, e-taxi, municipal buses, private transportation that is electric based. So there is incentives like that we can in place to drive that type of traffic. But I urge caution on I'll use the word draconian or old school, that sort of impact to the negative and don't have the desired effect in the end.
Very good. Director Ajbar, Andy, any thoughts on that before we go to the next question?
Yeah, just from my side quickly, I think draconian is a strong word. But I mean, I sort of see it from the other perspective. It's how do we give cities and regions now levers to control this, to basically drive access to public transportation or to drive behaviors? How can we incentivize good behaviors? And that's what we need to think about, is like, how are we going to get those behaviors to change? And unfortunately, some of those behaviors will be road user charging, tolling, congestion zone charging. And to be honest, it's a case of, yes, it might be draconian to actually charge somebody $10 to get in Manhattan, or, that might be the perception. But that was the perception in London about sort of 12, 15 years ago when they brought in the congestion zone charging there. And that's stepped up time over time. It's really driven behaviors. Public transportation has increased. People are now cycling more and more through London. It really has been a big benefit and a big revenue source for Transport for London, given some of the budget problems that they have at the moment. So yes, it might be draconian, but it really is, it's a temporary sort of pushback from the population as to how this might be seen. But in the long term, it can really be a good lever for the city to basically take control of the transportation network holistically. And we see thinking about it now. So the cities in Australia, a lot of European cities, obviously New York, LA. I do think the sort of congestion zone is going to be a necessary lever that's going to help reduce congestion and drive people back to public transportation.
Yeah, I think $10 is actually a good start, so I don't think that's draconian.
Well, I agree with both of my panelists. But I think it's going to take some time to build the public confidence back up to get into public transportation. Because I tell you, COVID in a way set us back, but there are a lot of research going on various development on the autonomous vehicle side. If you all remember, at the beginning of COVID, around March, April, we had a bus driver in Detroit, DDOT bus driver, passed away because somebody came in the bus and coughed, and the bus driver passed away because of that. That really made national news. A lot of people shied away from using public transit. I was talking to the CEO of the Ann Arbor Transit System yesterday. I said, how's your ridership level? He said, it's terrible. So how do we build the public confidence back up to start realizing that this is still a safe mode? I think it's going to take us showing that we are taking all the necessary public health and safety precautions, sanitizing the buses every night. You know, a lot of that promotional and putting it all out there, be transparent. I think eventually, also, quite frankly, promoting the fact that it is still the safest and cheapest way to get from point A to point B. I think that's going to be a key factor in building public confidence. I mean, Sean, you know, downtown Detroit right now, Q1 rail line was really designed and built for that entertainment district in downtown, with all the sporting events being canceled. Q1 is probably, I don't know what their ridership is now, but it's probably very, very low. So how do you, when the sporting event starts back up, how do you get people to feel comfortable enough to get in those things? I think it's a big challenge.
Yeah, I don't think Q1 is even running now, Paul.
That's what I understand. It's not running right now. They had to shut it down. That's a lot of revenue that losing. On the EV side, for us in the public sector, our role is somewhat limited. We were not, if you look at it, we did not help build gas stations, right? These were built by private individuals and corporations. So for us, we have to be careful that we are not trying to be all things to everybody. We have to focus on our core mission, which is building roads and bridges and infrastructure. However, we do have a role to play in there. Maybe making our park and ride accessible, downtown right-of-ways where, you know, we can put charging stations as parking meters where people can pull up, you know, charging their cars while they're out shopping or in restaurants and all that. By making those kind of concessions to be able to install those kind of EV charging stations, I think we have that kind of role to play. But in building stations all over the place, I think that will be a mission creep, in my opinion, and it just give our critics something to beat us over the head about.
You know, that relates to another question that came in, and Brendan, this might apply to you too, obviously Andy here, but the question, you know, will any mobility as a service players, again, regarding any mode, we can be thinking of this as first mile, last mile application, but will any of them actually make money is the question, and how? I mean, to add to that question, so it's a good one here, is who are the entities that are likely to be the ones that have to make money in order to have this enhanced infrastructure and ecosystem function well? And so maybe we can kind of talk from that perspective. I don't know, Brendan, if you want to start, because on the electrification side, that's certainly part of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hot topic. So, you know, the path towards profitability for infrastructure companies 5 years ago was very murky, right? And what you based your forward-looking EBITDA positive or your number for profitability was on vehicle utilization, transit utilization of your EV charging, and basically the selling of services, right? And it was all predicated versus how many EVs, regardless of the platform, were put into the space. And that's still dominant today. The good news, if you look at California, which are 6 to 7% total EV adoption, the rest of the country is at 1.5 on average. You know, it really, again, how many units are in operation will drive profitability. And that's just on the infrastructure side, right? It's a simple, and then you have to keep down cost. You have to take advantage of grant money that's issued by the states and municipal authorities to augment your amount of capital investment so you get a quicker return on that investment. But overall, you know, you've got to get to that utilization number. And that utilization number is predicated by how many manufacturers are out there putting EVs on the market. The good news, and I'll leave this part of the topic on this, is we looked at the numbers recently, and you have approaching $300 billion worth of capital investment from the automotive OEMs and OEMs on a variability of platforms, everything from trucks to buses to new EV platforms coming out. So if those vehicles are successful in the marketplace, similar to Tesla, profitability is assured on the infrastructure side. The vehicle side is a little bit more tricky. The trick to profitability there is vehicles and platforms that will move with a rate of velocity simultaneously with a low cost of batteries. And batteries, when we started out many years ago, were about $300 per kilowatt hour is what you average them at. We're approaching 120 to 100. The goal for many OEMs is to get it around 80, and you have an equivalency to internal combustion engines. So all of that's on the pathway. So the future profitability of this space looks very good. It really is going to be pre-dependent, though, on municipal adoption of fleet vehicles and consumer adoption of passenger carrying vehicles.
Great. How about you, Andy, on that? Again, can't leave mobility as a service without getting your perspective.
So yeah, I mean, there's a long history at the moment of different operators and players in the mass ecosystem globally that have been born, big news, fade away, fizzle fairly quick. And that's just the way the mass ecosystem is at the moment, because we haven't found a way of coherently bringing all of these things together. And mass can work. And we've seen examples in cities over in Europe, and we're starting to see examples in other areas of the globe now, sort of Singapore, down in Australia, where we're getting to start to see how you make mass work properly. And the simple thing is, cities and regions need to stand up and take ownership of mobility as a service. They need to actually embrace these mass operators and bring them into the fold. And they need to control and they need to regulate them, and they need to make sure that they're operating the areas and at the times that they need them to operate to manage the transport network holistically. So unless cities can sort of stand up and sort of bring them in, you're only going to get these little fits and starts of sort of VC funded companies which are trying to get a foothold. We're trying to make it work. But unless you sort of embrace those and bring them into a sort of a controlled environment and push people
to that end, Andy, yeah, this question too, I think with what you're saying, can you, without putting you on the spot there, but how will they make money and who will be making money in order to do what you just said? So
for example, and this is actually could become a revenue stream for cities as a whole. If the city is actually managing the infrastructure, you are now managing the infrastructure that brings together the different mass players in a region. You can basically offer connected journeys through that region using both public and private mobility service providers. So the bike shares, the ride shares, demand responsive transport, ride hailing, all of those, that can be brought together and offered as a package with public transportation. So now I'll be able to sort of get a bike from where I live, cycle to the metro station, get the metro into the center of DC, and then have a ride hailing service pick me up from the metro station and take me to my final destination. So I could book that as a single journey. I'm paying for that as a single journey. I've now increased the utilization of the bike share and the ride hailing system, and I've still used public transportation system, because public transportation has to be the backbone of mass. It's how you move so many people effectively, cost effectively and safely into the city in the morning. So it's going to drive utility of these different mobility service providers. It's going to make them drive the revenue, drive the utilization, putting the managing authority, the city or the DOT, back in charge of the mobility as a service in the region, so they sort of make sure that this is being done in an equitable manner. And at the same time, if it's done correctly, if the mass operators are going to be paying for access to this service and driving capacity for them and driving demand on their sort of solutions, the access to this mass platform can actually be charged for by the city. And basically, they can actually derive a revenue from it to make it cost neutral in the long run. And it's a complex jigsaw. It's going to need cities to stand up and take ownership of the mobility network. And I'm not just talking about sort of the road network or the public transportation network, it's everything. You've got to grab everything and sort of own the mass problem and really sort of drive the solution.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think this is why we're seeing particularly larger cities having directors of mobility now. We didn't see that role before, and all the large cities are hiring these people to really probably lose sleep at night trying to do what you just said, because it is a complex challenge. All right, there's another question here. I want to, again, to the director. We hear that Michigan is considering toll roads. Tell us which region or corridor might be best, first case use. And I think, Director Ajba, relative to that too, you might want to even touch on the earlier topic of legislation and what's even allowed in Michigan that relates to this topic as well.
No, thank you for that question. Our legislature just passed a bill that's giving us the first step into this area to at least go out and study it statewide. What is it going to look like if we toll different freeways? As I mentioned, it's all because of the changing times. People want good transportation system, good infrastructure, but getting them to pay for it is becoming a hard sell. So we have to look for other ways to raise revenue. I don't know if tolling is going to be the answer. I think we'll see what the result of the study shows. But one thing I would say for us as a state, over the years, we've done a good job of creating a good roadway network system where there's redundancy in our system. For people in Michigan, that at any given time, we can close a freeway like I-75 in Oakland County and still be able to get 250,000 vehicles per day around that closure because we needed to put up a bridge beam or whatever, or demo a bridge that's over that freeway. In a way, it's a good thing. So you look at I-75, you have Woodward Road, Telegraph, John R. as parallel routes. If you toll I-75, what does it do to those roadways? Does it drive people to those roadways and you have congestion on that roadways? Those are all the things that are going to be looked at in the study to come up with what will be the best routes and way to go. But I would also say part of that tolling will have to be a legislation that says you can do camera enforcement. Right now in Michigan, we don't have camera enforcement. It's against the law. So I would imagine if the next step is to allow tolling, that would have to be part of the legislation moving forward. Again,
Figuring out ways to raise the revenue, to do this. Any other thoughts from Andy or Brendan on that?
Tolling is always going to be difficult. I mean, Sydney is a prime example, as the director just sort of mentioned there, about pushing traffic from toll roads out into sort of other roads. And we've seen massive sort of congestion build up in sort of suburban areas and on parallel routes because they've introduced tolling on some of the main arterial roads coming into the central business district. And that's really it's not sort of contained the congestion. It's basically just evened out the congestion over a larger area now. And that has detrimental effects. That has a knock on the congestion impacts on the public transportation, and then it becomes gridlock for the city. So congestion management is going to be a key aspect of this.
Yes. So I know we're just a couple more minutes left. I think, Brendan, a lot of experts are saying that the increase in electric vehicles is going to be happening sooner than we think at a scale many people are finding hard to believe. When I was in China a couple of years ago for a conference, I was just sort of stunned at how fast they're moving in this direction. But America has been dabbling, to put it that way, with electric vehicles for a long time. What is your prediction of what's going to happen here with the increase in electric vehicles, and what will the infrastructure look like to make this really user-friendly to the public?
Yeah, it is interesting. When we first, I can look back at history, and we came out of the gate strong when we brought the Leaf and the Volt to market, and we actually led for a little bit a period of time. Asia then began to take off, led by China. And then the European markets went ahead of the US simultaneously. So now we're following, clearly, the lead. but also we get to see what they're doing to create successful situations. So we're learning simultaneously. There's no question with the amount of platforms coming to the US market over the next 3 to 5 years that EVs are here to stay. If we look at what's going on both in the personal vehicle sector and the EV fleet electrification of massive municipal fleets, if we look at Amazon's deal with Rivian, that they're going to electrify their last mile delivery fleet and even go a lot further, it is going to begin to accelerate. From an infrastructure perspective, it goes back to the earlier comment. What are these smart solutions that are already integrated into the existing ecosystem? And how do we do it smartly so we don't have to redo it 5 years from now? It's going to take off, but how do we do it in an equitable manner and create access for all? So charging solutions, you know, we provide a lot of them, but you have to have the right ones, right? And each company is going to come in here, and even mine, because in the end, we want to make a profit, right? And I want to sell chargers. That's what I want to do and create revenue streams from customer utilization. But it has to be done smartly. You know, right now the numbers indicate that 80% of the charging takes place at home or in multifamily dwellings or high dwell places, right? And then about 20% those are going to take place in the public. That number might change a little bit over time, but it has generally held steady for the last 7 to 8 years. So our solutions have to mirror that. High-speed charging is great, but it comes at a premium. L2 charging on an AC circuit is cheaper. So we have to maximize and come up with creative solutions that look at that and say, don't over-infrastructure in one place and under-infrastructure in another, so we create this continuous loop of vehicle adoption. And on the previous comment, I think that it really is a troubling situation when we talk about, you know, roads and tolling. And in doing so, are we creating a barrier to access to different segments of the population? They can't use those roads, or they can't get to EV transportation because the fastest way is through the toll road. So, you know, that plays a role in all this, and this is part of this smart-based ecosystem that we want to make sure we're equitable, and we want to make sure we have smart solutions for today and future-proofing for tomorrow.
Yes, good. Well, it looks like we're out of time, but I got to ask this last question because I've been wondering it on a personal level too. Director Ajaba, even though MDOT is not going to own the Gordie Howe Bridge, is it going to have bike lanes for integrated mobility?
It's going to be wide shoulders out there, and I think that honestly, I believe there will be wide shoulders and sidewalks for. Yeah.
Okay. And as smart as vehicles are going to get, we won't need a barrier to separate the bikes from the cars because it'll be impossible to hit each other, right?
That's correct.
All right. Well, yes, on that note, again, thank you all. Thank you, audience, for some really great questions. And we are out of time. So have a great day, everybody. And thanks again.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good job, John.